Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Breakthrough Robust 9 Smart Ways to Tackle Usage, Revenue Leakage, and Channel Complexity in 2025. I'm Inga Borman, VP of Marketing here at BluLogix, and I'll be your host for this session. We know your time is valuable, so we're going to jump right in with some powerful insights to help you navigate the evolving world of subscription management. Whether you're a SaaS leader, managed services provider, or a company scaling through partnerships, getting the packaging, the pricing, the usage-based billing right is critical for driving that predictable, scalable growth. And honestly, if you don't tackle these challenges head on, they're going to hold you back. So today we have two experts joining us who are experts in this field and they know it inside and out. First, we have Igor Stenmark, who's the managing director at MGI Research. He's spent years researching and advising businesses on how to build scalable, high-performing revenue models. And his expertise in subscription billing, monetization strategies, financial operations make him the perfect person to help break down the trends and challenges shaping 2025. And leading today's conversation, we have Colby Schreiber, who's a revenue optimization expert here at BluLogix. Colby's worked with companies across SaaS, IT services, telecom, to help them really automate, scale, and streamline their complex billing processes. And he really understands firsthand the struggles that businesses face when it comes to usage pricing, partner selling, revenue retention, and more importantly, how to fix them. So today, Colby's going to be sitting down with Igor for a deep dive conversation into what's working, what's not, and what businesses need to do in 2025 to stay ahead. So let's get started. Colby, over to you.
Inga, thank you for the grand welcome. And Igor, thanks for being willing to share your insights with us today.
Thanks, guys, for hosting me. Appreciate it.
Good. So, Igor, for years now, you've advised many companies, including ours, how to evaluate billing operations and how to evaluate different types of billing solutions. While we can appreciate that every business is unique, I'm pretty sure there's probably some reoccurring obstacles that you see time and time again. What do you think leads to most companies having to eventually face these types of issues, whether it be complexity, volume, or anything else like that?
I think at the core of it is really ability of monetization or billing solutions specifically to support their business strategy. No one in business wants to be in a situation where the billing system or its limitations are really dictating the business strategy. Where you say, I want to sell a particular package in a particular country with a certain pricing model, and my IT organization comes back and says, well, we can't really do it. Our billing system is constricted, and therefore you're going to have to wait a couple of years before we can accommodate you. So that forces many companies to say, well, let's look at our options. Let's make sure we're not in a situation where our requirements are not being met. So that's probably, I think, the most common reason. So anything that has to do with introducing new pricing methods, new approaches to rating, metering, doing usage-based billing, doing volume purchasing agreements, selling through a channel, all those things can create discontinuities in what, let's say, a current billing solution may support and what an organization ultimately needs.
Makes sense. I know from our experience here, we see that companies tend to want to stick to their established strategy in terms of meeting the customer's needs until they come across a deal that they can't refuse. But in order to get that deal done, there's a new way they have to do business. There's a new piece of flexibility that's not necessarily accounted for. With that being said, and there is value to having some interim solutions to navigate that and make sure you close that business and you can deliver on it. How often should business leaders really be reviewing their current billing operations and planning for their future billing operations?
It should really be dictated by what's happening in their business, and how fast the business environment is changing. Is it the industry with a lot of change, very competitive, perhaps very fragmented, lots of competitors all chasing the same opportunities? Or is it the more of a franchise business where a company may have a very well-defined market position that's well established and defensible, and therefore we don't need to do things as frequently. But if your company happens to be in a fast-paced, highly competitive environment, perhaps is growing above average, and there's lots of opportunity to create value, you're probably going to be doing it quite often. What happens in practical terms is that in that kind of environment where the sales teams, they'll sell whatever deal they can sell. And whether or not the technology organization or finance organization can support processing and billing and monetizing, invoicing this stuff, that doesn't really enter their mind typically. So it's very few organizations where we have really strict discipline and say, like, we're not going to sell a deal because we can't invoice for it. Usually they'll sell and then throw it across a transom to finance and IT and say, figure it out. And, normally companies figure it out. Often it's semi-manual or manual. They produce some sort of a kludge. Maybe they invoice a part of it. You have revenue leakage as a result of that. That eventually creates friction with the customer, creates customer services issues. So companies get around it, but it's never a clean solution.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned a couple key things there that make my heart jump a little bit is revenue leakage and customer satisfaction issues. So that kind of outlines what I guess the issues would be of not going back and refining the processes, but facing a whole billing project or accounting for a new way long-term to account for certain business scenarios, I'm sure that raises a lot of red flags with a lot of different people because the change is so deep in the business, right? So I guess what are some fears that you see around having to deal with these types of complexities, and what are some, I guess, practical ways to go about setting out a plan so that you can mitigate a lot of those fears?
Yeah. I think normally nobody wakes up in the morning and says, let me go rebuild my billing system. It's like saying, I feel good this morning. Let me go have a root canal.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what a lot of the people in finance and tech will tell you. We're not looking forward to that. That's not a simple situation. And part of the reason is we see it as being high risk. Changing or producing a new billing system, it's a high risk operation. You have to really sit back and contemplate it for a bit because you're essentially putting your company at risk if it doesn't work. But doing nothing also is not an option because if doing nothing means you're accepting revenue leakage, you're accepting friction with customers, you're accepting customer billing invoicing disputes. And there's a whole bevy of reasons why just sticking to status quo is a bad idea to begin with. You're limiting your growth. There's lots of stuff. With what gives a lot of companies pause in jumping into this lake and saying, okay, I'll go have a root canal. You convinced me. Pain is really unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
We think about the issues of complexity because if you operate a very simple business, you're selling one product in one currency, one package, in one country for one channel, you don't really have billing problems. Lots and lots of solutions out there today that can do a good job selling, subscriptions to some widget that you're selling, $1 a month or whatever else you may be selling. But if you're selling, a few dozen products in 15 different configurations, in 10 different currencies, through a multi-level channel, maybe N-tier channel, with various packages and peak and off-peak rates, usage and subscriptions and so on, your life can be a bit more complicated. So what we're talking about here is complexity. Mm-hmm. So complexity is something that companies view as being a big risk. And our view and our advice to companies has always been take a step back and take a more nuanced approach to this. Certainly there are complexity in your use cases that you should think how you could maybe reduce that complexity, eliminate it, reduce whatever you can do. It's not always possible to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it you may be able to successfully outsource, give it to somebody else, and they accept the responsibility for management and they deal with the risk. And some of it you actually should be embracing because no good thing is simple. Good things are complex. And if you're able to embrace complexity, you may be the only company in your industry or in your geography able to deal with, some added layer of complexity. Let's say if you're in logistics and a customer says to you, listen, I really would like to not only produce the invoice, but I want to break it down into small components and give different parts of my invoice to different parts of my company or my ecosystem. Can you do that? And if you can do that, maybe you got yourself a very high retention customer who is willing to pay perhaps slightly higher rate to get what they want and what they need. So there's definitely some wisdom in looking for ways to identify the types of complexity that you can be good at and perhaps be better than average and embrace that and kind of harness that to your own competitive advantage so you can create some sort of a unique edge in your marketplace. So that's kind of our view historically in this area and what we've been often telling our clients on the user side.
Yeah, I think that's a view a lot of people can resonate with. I think it's a classic ode of turning an obstacle that everyone has to eventually come against. And if you're the only person that can solve for it, you definitely have that competitive advantage in this business environment, and you need every edge you can get, whether you operate on a local scale or on a national scale. You mentioned again, well, I want to go back again to revenue leakage. Is there a certain percentage of revenue leakage where you think people really need to draw a line in the sand and address their billing issues immediately? Or is there like certain revenue leakage that's tolerable? I guess give us a little bit more education around that.
Well, the bigger you are, the less tolerable is revenue leakage. If you're a $10 billion or a $20 billion business and you have 2% revenue leakage, you can do the math what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably in many cases enough to create an earnings surprise in a few quarters. So we've done extensive amount of research, field research work on that, and a couple of things that we've continue to take away from that is that many companies do not have a good handle on revenue leakage. It starts with kind of looking in the mirror saying, I'm going to admit we have revenue leakage. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. Let me find out first. So a large percentage, maybe 40% of companies don't have a clue. Some companies believe that they don't have any. And in fact, we've often encountered that reaction, but when you talk to people in finance, they'll say, what 1%, 2% is much higher than that, but we can't put it on paper. It's embarrassing. And there's a range between, sort of between 1% and 3%, but many companies will quietly admit, yes, that sounds like us. That's our pain. But we've seen also many high growth companies where that number is much higher, maybe as much as 5 to 7%, which is a significant amount of money. And what it stems from is inability to invoice correctly for things you sell, inability to even do things on time, inability to really classify revenue and convert whatever cash is coming into revenue. So there's a lot of different kind of sources of where revenue leakage stems from. But it is an existing problem. It's an ongoing problem, and having a strong monetization strategy with really a kind of hands-on approach to things like billing can help. It can't eliminate it ever completely. I don't believe that, right. But it can help reduce it.
Right. Right. And at those percentages, it definitely seems like it would be worth the time and effort to take care of them. Anyway, so in a previous life, you may not notice about me, Igor, I actually used to be a channel manager for a cybersecurity company. And our main offerings were pretty much all bundled essentially with, one or two pieces of our own proprietary technology,
Mm-hmm.
along with, maybe an EDR from one company and the hardware appliance from another company. And that's what we sold.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the complexity that adds in billing, but I just want to go ahead and say there's additional complexity there that needs to be managed in terms of fulfillment, renewals, placing the purchase orders to those other manufacturers, just making sure everything is tidy. What, I guess, new changes have you seen in the building world, or what do you wish more, I guess, tech companies plan for in terms of billing operations? Is there something that they're all missing in their plans, or?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, especially in the tech world, are struggling with what on the surface seems like a simple exercise, which is selling a mix of product, could be physical product, software subscriptions, professional services or continuous services, and potentially financing in some cases. And doing that both through kind of this omni-channel ecosystem, so selling through direct sales assisted channel, doing it online, with self-service or sales assisted online, and doing it through an end-tier channel. And that is a pretty significant challenge that many companies continue to struggle with. They try to stand up some sort of a billing system, some sort of a monetization solution to support the channel effort. And oftentimes it runs into pretty serious issues with things like, well, you have distributors, you have master resellers, and they all want to be able to sell for multiple companies. So if you give them a system to sell your products, they want to be able to sell in additional things. Some of them come from themselves, and some of them are it's their own product catalog, and some of it could be coming from a totally different vendor. So your security vendor may have been a channel manager may be selling software solutions for security, maybe some hardware services, probably not financing as much, but maybe also selling our security solutions as well as hardware from HP or Dell or someone else like that. So integrating it, creating this unified system where you can cleanly isolate how they do the billing, if you do billing on their behalf as a channel master, and giving them options, giving them tools to create their own independent product catalog. That's been a big deal, especially in the tech world, I think.
And staying in the tech world, I guess theme of things, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention automation or AI. Where do you see that playing a role here? And the goods, the things to be cautioned about.
Yeah, I think AI will have an impact. There's AI that you can insert into your products, but there's AI that you can insert into your operation to help the customers handle customer support, handle implementation, finding out what's in the billing system. And you have to realize that billing contains a tremendous amount of data that no other system in the enterprise has actually at the level. So ERP systems generally don't have this level of detail at a transactional level, but the billing systems do. So how do you get access to the customers, allow them access that system, or even internally for internal purposes, finding out what's going on, what's inside the system, what's processing, what's stuck, what's not being paid, what's being delayed, and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity for that. But I think the opportunities there, the cautions are that a lot of companies have quite a bit of experience with machine learning, and I think that's now got newfound legitimacy, if you will. People are saying, well, this stuff is now street legal. I'm going to really go all in on that, and that's good. Generative AI, I think we're still learning how to deploy that in enterprise environments because you have serious issues of customer data privacy, You need to be able to isolate, kind of sequester data from different companies and make sure it's not intermixed in AI models. So just harvesting customer data for making an AI bot could be a pretty dangerous exercise. You could end up in a lawsuit pretty quickly by doing that. But I think our more fundamental issue is generative AI today, at least today, it will change over time. When you ask it the question on, say March 1st, and you ask the same question on September 1st, you may get very different answers, even though the data has not really changed underneath. So it's really, it's probabilistic, it's not deterministic in its approach. So, so we're not at the point yet where we can guarantee that systems based on Gen AI can give you this deterministic, consistent response to every employee, on every date of a year. So that's the issue.
Fair enough. You mentioned lawsuits in there, so I'm going to just pivot into everyone's favorite conversation, taxes. How often do you see that being a missing component of existing billing systems?
I think every billing system integrates with some sort of a taxation or party taxation system. There's lots of choice out there, from SureTax and Vertex and Avalara and many others. And some people have even written their own, which I can't really understand why. But there certainly are very complex use cases for tax management, tax calculation, whether it's you operating in countries where they require immediate, sharing of invoices, kind of electronic filing of invoices with tax authorities. You have specialist requirements of places like Spain, Brazil, I think now Italy as well, and it's coming pretty much in most European countries, and probably in many countries in Americas as well, and Asia. So that's one aspect of it. And then there are highly specialized tax use cases that require taxes to be computed based on things like location and hour factors, which makes things quite a bit more complex. You need to have a pretty healthy level of abstraction in the billing engine, so when it interacts with the taxation and taxation systems will calculate the tax, but you have to give it the right parameters, and that's the job of the billing system to do that.
Yeah. So let me see. Let's pivot over to smart pricing strategies. What do you think we're going to see in this year when it comes to, I guess, different pricing strategies and pricing models?
I don't know if there's really that much of a change. I think everybody talks about more emphasis on usage billing. Yes, usage billing is getting a lot more airplay, and especially with many vendors that have AI-based offerings. Many of them depend on large LLM platforms like OpenAI, and you have to basically do this on a per use basis of some sort, prepaid usage. I think ultimately a lot of customers in the receiving end of those invoices, they may like usage billing in the beginning because it gives them a chance to penetrate a new capability, new functionality without having to commit large amounts of capital up front. But ultimately, they want predictability. And predictability means they'll go for any kind of a enterprise deal you can give them, where it's like, give us, we'll give you $1 million and give us all we can eat. So we can really control our budgets and really control our planning and so on. I think those are kind of the things that are on the minds. This is what I'm hearing from the field, basically. Everybody wants usage billing, they'll try things out, but ultimately they want predictability.
I do want to take another swing at my past experience. So when I was a channel manager, I absolutely loved that role. I was aware of quite a few inefficiencies, not just at our company, but how a lot of our resellers operated. One of the biggest frustrations, and I think the thing that burned a lot of or added a lot of strain to the relationships with these different partners was around renewals. I feel like nobody had a good solution at the time. That being said, is there anything else that you think that MSPs that primarily resell other companies' services that they should really, I guess, keep an eye on as far as their whole revenue operations goes?
I think first and foremost, I mean, it's basics. It's really blocking and tackling, making sure you have your tabs on contracts that are in place, renewal dates, 90 days prior to expiration, start the renewal process, signal something to sales. They don't have this data, make sure that the terms and conditions are adhered to. If there's a prescribed maximums on increases in prices and so on and so on. So it's really renewal is easy if you have all your data and you have enough time. If you have 60, 90 days, renewals, day before expiration, very hard. Usually it's a losing proposition.
I get it. Yeah, got to really double down on the basics and make sure you have your affairs in order. So I guess in that spirit, let's do the common reasons of failure for projects, because I'm sure there's plenty of times people make an attempt to revamp their billing operations, their billing systems, and whatnot. The migration might not work, or sometimes everything goes as planned except for the outcome doesn't function in the way they were hoping for. Walk us through the do's and don'ts of projects or preparing for a project.
Yeah, I think one of the key obstacles we see to success is data. Companies really spend a lot of time scoping out their requirements, produce this list of 600 line items representing each one of their requirements. And then they forget to really take a hard look at the data that they're going to be feeding into this very advanced, shiny new system. And data coming in could be very dirty, it could be completely unnormalized, could be coming from different systems. And as a result, they begin to have problems kind of in the first day of testing. And then it really gets worse because it's not only not coming in clean, it's coming into regular intervals. It's got different time stamps, and I'm not even talking about usage-based data. I'm talking about just like basic. You want to do your normal billing cycle, right? So that's one of the big reasons. People overshoot sometimes. I was just arguing, making sure that you guys have always take into account big requirements for billing, but I think they overshoot. They go for this list of 600 to 1,000 requirements. How many of them are actually going to be used, practically speaking? Probably very few, maybe 50%. So really, understanding not only what is a possible functionality in a solution, but what's usable, what's going to be practically applied in a given time frame, and trying to put some spacing and creating a minimum viable product first, and then moving on to more complex use cases. Also, our thing that people fail to do is really understanding your actual use cases, what really is important, what's going to really drive the business outcomes that you need, as opposed to like, well, I think we need very sophisticated outcome-based pricing. When are you going to implement it? Well, we don't know yet, but we'll need it eventually. So there's clearly a balance that needs to be struck between like what's desirable and what's practically usable, what can be really realistically implemented, defined, implemented, tested, and put into production. So that's definitely a disconnect. I think we see a lot of companies also spending a lot of time evaluating solutions, spending significant amount of time, and forgetting to really validate their implementation partners. So we'll say, okay, we'll buy the software solution from company X, and then, they brought in some guy that can do the implementation, never really check them out thoroughly. And that's where a lot of the source of friction often lies. So as much as anyone is researching the vendor of a software solution, they should spend as much time on the implementation partner, because chances are we're going to spend more money on implementation than on software. Definitely in year one and year two. So these are just some examples. A bit more.
And that was a good piece of insight. I mean, data hygiene is one thing, but I guess just knowing what to expect from a cost perspective and what to look out for or to do to validate your chosen partner. This is definitely, again, not projects that should be taken lightly. So they have huge impacts on your business. So that being said, Inga is letting me know that we have some questions. Inga?
Thank you so much, Colby, and Igor as well. Just wanted to get the questions. I know we are coming up on time right now, but a couple of things that were submitted actually by people who are registering and not able to attend. But there were a couple that were submitted that I thought were interesting. I think you've covered them partially, but I think there's the I think maybe just netting it out. What are the biggest causes of revenue leakage, and what are like the big, say, 3 things that a company can do in 2025 to deal with their revenue leakage issues? I think everyone's trying to get to that answer, I think, ultimately.
Yeah. One of the big reasons why companies experience revenue leakage is they may have a certain use case, and the product that they chose to support billing in this area does not have really a sufficient level of abstraction to really translate that into a financial transaction that can operate. So that's one of the major reasons. We've seen companies bill for subscriptions using one-time charges, basically simulating subscriptions. That happens a lot. They can't really deal with things like leasing. So there's a clear mismatch between the type of service or product being sold and the pricing modality that it's sold in versus what the capability of the system are. So that's one of the major reasons. What can you do about it? Kind of, again, build your use cases, build the use case scenarios. If you're bringing in a new supplier for a billing solution, if you have 6 to 9, 15 use cases, have them present to you and run through the use cases, and here are inputs, here are outputs. This is what happened, and that's a very easy kind of a check before you commit to something.
Okay, quickly then, one last one I'll sneak in over the deadline, but so we had a lot of questions from people about AI, obviously, and just getting them sort of into one. It's how do you see them being integrated into the product portfolios? And then how do you see them being articulated out from a pricing and a channel perspective? Meaning, how are people gonna, how can a company, particularly like an IT services provider, managed services provider, or software that's integrating some component of AI, how can they go about getting them priced and into the hands of their channel partners? I think it's sort of the broad question. Yeah,
it's a little bit out of scope of what we're trying to cover here, but I think number one is understanding, the business basics. What is a business case? Who is the target audience? Which budget is the money going to come from? In the beginning, when 2 years ago ChatGPT appeared in the horizon publicly, everybody was excited about, we're going to sell additional product that's going to be AI based, and we're going to charge separately for that. And we stood up and said at MGI and said, look, this is probably not going to happen, because it's not that people have extra budget. We don't all of a sudden have another 10, 15% money in their finance or IT budget to afford that. You may have to throw it into a product because it becomes more table stakes. It's unfortunate, but that's what it is. But just to have a seat at the table, you may have to do some of that in part. So that's something to really think through and address. So we see increasingly that many larger vendors are beginning to utilize this strategy, as opposed to trying to charge $30 a month for every seat or $2 a conversation. those are non-starters, generally speaking. But if you can bring a product that has a very clear ROI, let's say it's a product that helps them navigate, documentation for a complex solution that's been put in place. So rather than leaving them a manual how to operate something, give them an online AI system so they can go in and ask any question they want about how the system operates and get training for that. That's pretty valuable to a customer. That's a great start and really earns a lot of goodwill. And then you'll be able to sell them more stuff.
All right. Okay, wanting to wrap up. Thank you for that. That was great. And thank you both of us for sitting down with us today. And Igor, thank you particularly for all of your knowledge and insights. And thank you as well, attendees, for sitting down with us and having this conversation. We will be sending out the recording within the hour after here. And also with the recording, we have a white paper around this topic that we've done that are actionable sort of, things that you can do specifically that are sort of more on those targeted top 10 lists and really what that roadmap is for your monetization platform for 2025. So take a look at that as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending here, and thank you as well, Colby and Igor, for all the good insights. And we will see you on the next one.
All right. See ya.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye-bye.